We did a deep dive analysis on the political differences on social media. Basically, the two categories were Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter, right? Opposing groups. And they said, so before we even start, our analysis showed that over 60% of the initial online traffic that was snowballed into this chaos that happened across the country were enacted by foreign countries. And I felt real down in that moment. I said, so which one do you think they think is right? Because they're funding both of them. It was like, oh my God, we fell for every bit of it. If you become really emotional about something you don't know a lot about, you got to stop and ask yourself why.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. The purpose of this podcast is to tell the stories of Alaskans of interest and importance. Today, our guest is former Alaska State Senator and Iraq War veteran Josh Revak. After a mortar blast in Iraq blew a quarter-size hole through his posterior foot, Revak was discharged from the Army, returned to his home state of Minnesota, and got his first job working in politics on John McCain's 2008 presidential campaign. Then, while visiting the Alaska family of a fellow soldier who had been killed in Iraq, Revak met Congressman Don Young's staff, who suggested he apply for a job in the congressman's office. After 8 years working for Don Young and then Senator Dan Sullivan, Revak ran for the Alaska State House in 2018 and was elected to represent the Abbott Loop area of Anchorage. When State Senator Chris Birch suddenly passed away, Revak was appointed to that seat by Governor Dunleavy. In 2022, with the sudden death of Don Young, Revak ran for that U.S. House seat with the endorsement of Don Young's widow. After Mary Peltola ultimately won the seat, Revak went to work for Peltola's office. He is now lobbying for the drone program at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Josh Revak, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
So where were you born?
I was born in a little town called Two Harbors, Minnesota. It's just north of Duluth.
And did you go all the way through high school there, like you stayed in that relatively small town?
No, I had a really rough, diverse kind of upbringing. So I don't remember living in Two Harbors. So we moved pretty quickly down toward where my father's parents, my paternal grandparents lived. And
also in Minnesota?
In Minnesota. So it was a small town about just 50 miles west of the Twin Cities, maybe. And I actually lived in a trailer park, in a trailer house. We were very poor. And my parents saved everything they could to get us out of there. We used government assistance. And I remember the big blocks of white government cheese, the Reagan administration. It was actually pretty good. We were very thankful.
It's an acquired taste, but once you acquire it.
And the powdered milk. And all that.
What year were you born?
81.
Okay.
So it's funny about I say it and people like roll their eyes but my mom went into labor during Reagan's inaugural speech on January 20th, 1981.
She was so excited.
Yeah, I say that I knew who the Carter administration was, so I waited. That's a little political joke, but in reality, it was just one of them things where it's funny because politics, my parents weren't very political at all. My grandparents were staunch Democrats, and they had changed my uncle's name. His name was Lee Anthony Revak. When Lee Harvey Oswald assassinated the president, they never called him Lee again. And so since I was born, his name was Ron. And so my dad wanted to name me Ronald Reagan Revak after my grandfather. And he said I'd never be allowed in his house if they did that. Like, he was pretty big on them. Because they weren't Reagan fans. I laughed pretty hard every time I think. He'd roll over in his grave, they say, if he knew what I was doing up here with these Republicans, they say.
So your parents were big Reagan fans, which I think is unusual.
They weren't really political at all. They just thought since I was born during the inauguration.
Gotcha. And you have brothers and sisters?
No, just me.
Oh, only child.
Just me, and I was,
Gary Stevens is an only child.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Previous podcast guests. Alaska State Senate President Gary Stevens, and he's an only child.
Nice. Yeah. I didn't know that. That's good. I knew I had something in common with Gary. He's a good playwright, too. I was shocked.
Oh, did you see Uncle Ted?
Yes. Natasha bought the theater. She was so excited, and she brought all of us into the folks we used to serve together, and we went in there to watch that play, and I was really thankful that she did that. Because that really was moving. I brought my daughter with me, who's a huge play enthusiast. She's a theater kid.
How old's your daughter?
She is 17.
Oh, wow.
Going on 30. That's my younger one. So my older one's 18 and going to UA.
So you had kids relatively young in your 20s?
Yeah. Yep. I was actually at war. So
Did you go straight from high school to the Army?
No. Real quick, speeding up through where it came from was we went from this trailer park to real poor. They saved everything to get a farm that was built in like 1896. It was just saved every penny to afford it. And we got into this farm and it was a lot of hard work. I was an only child. I was homeschooled. So we had 50 sheep and we had a whole flock of them and horses and cows and chickens.
So you were an only child who was homeschooled.
I was.
Were your parents super religious?
Not super, but yeah, they were definitely faithful, but they weren't super religious. Like it ended up being too much for them. And being an only child and homeschooled, it ended in a brutal divorce. So like earlier on in life, it was this dream, like chasing the American dream. My family is amazing. To just out of nowhere, this devastating. They've never spoken to one another since that day. So it was just this dramatic
and you're close with both
thing.
your parents, but they don't speak to each other?
I am now. At the time, I emancipated my parents when I was 17, and me and a friend moved out and enrolled ourselves in high school our senior year, and it was a big deal. I went into public school in high school, so I saw both worlds, and I enjoyed both. There's pros and cons, but since I lived on a hobby farm, there's a lot of things that kids don't learn in institutions these days that are real life. Like I was blessed to be able to help birthing sheep and take care of horses. There's a lot you learn that you otherwise wouldn't understand. It's a lot of different facets of life that you learn by taking care of animals like that. So it was good. And then there was the downsides were the socialization.
So you emancipated when you were 17. That sounds like that was like a pretty dramatic move. Were you still in high school?
Yeah. Yep. I didn't talk to my dad for 2 years, and it was the summer between my junior and senior year. Like right after my junior year, my friend and I decided that we were in the wrong place and we wanted something different. And so I emancipated my parents and we moved to Duluth, back closer to where I was from. I was about 200 miles away from where I lived at the time, and enrolled ourselves in high school there and did our senior year. I worked full time at a restaurant to survive. And it's funny, I learned probably all the things that helped me achieve in my professional life. I learned in restaurant work, like more so than the military. Really, being a waiter is you just really, everything from finance to customer service to presentation to product placement to advertising. I mean, really, it was a good education.
You see all kinds of people behaving well and behaving very badly.
Learn how to deal with them all, and sales. And
so you graduated from high school in Duluth, and then what happened?
So I graduated from high school and I still didn't have a lot of money. And of course, being a senior in high school in a town where you don't have any authority that's local, we learned that partying was a lot of fun. So in all the free time we had between our full-time jobs and school, we were pretty rowdy high school kids. And so actually, I had accumulated some fines before I moved from where I lived. And we were just hanging around a crowd that was just stagnant in life, and we didn't want to be that way. And so I had left some unpaid fines related to alcohol, I think minor consumptions or something like that. And I was 20 years old and I decided that I need to do something. I didn't have money for school. I was a waiter at the time and just trying to figure out what's next. What do I do to climb out here? And so I decided that the first thing I need to do is clean up the past a little bit. So I went down to take care of the unpaid fines I had. And the judge said, you need to see the inside of a jail cell. So September 10th, it was my first day in county jail.
September 10th. 2001.
Yes. And so I went in at 11:30 at night, so I didn't have to spend an extra minute in jail because it was going to be 5 days. The idea the judge was like, you need to see this. It'll help you.
It's crazy because it feels like you were doing the right thing by going down to take care of it. It's not like they caught you on the street and were like, hey.
Yeah, I think maybe they knew what my trajectory looked like. And so it was one of them scared. I think it was one of them scared straight kind of things. Like this will help you, like to see where you're going, because we're pretty rowdy. So I went in at 11:30 at night and I woke up my first day in county jail and I walked down into the cell block and I recognized people there from years before. And it was a very depressing feeling. As I walked down, I was like, oh my gosh, here's my friends. And I recognized one of them. They were playing spades. And I was like, hey, what's going on? And he was dealing spades. I'll never forget it. And he said, oh, what's up, man? Nothing. I guess a little plane hit the World Trade Center. And I was like, what? And I'm walking down the stairway and I could see the TV. They had one TV in there and it would play the news. And he looked up and he said, oh my God, there goes another one. And he kept dealing spades. We were sitting in jail. And yeah, so I was, for 5 days, we did nothing but watch the 9/11 news. And I don't know, I guess I've never felt so helpless. Life was stagnant and I wanted to do better. I want to do something that matters. Or at least maybe I could, if I died in the front lines of combat, it would be an honorable death, right? So I didn't have a family.
Better than being in jail with your friends playing spades.
Exactly.
While the world is exploding around you.
It was a horrible feeling. So I went into the recruiter the moment I got out of jail and I said, what's the safest thing I could do in the front lines of combat? And they said, you can be on a battle tank. And I was like, that's perfect. So that's what I did. And my 21st birthday was at the Mall of America in Minnesota. And I was shipping out the next day, vomiting, I think, on the way. 21st birthday.
When is your birthday?
January 24th.
Oh, okay. So about 5 months later, 4 months later.
Yeah, because my mom, she went into labor during Reagan's inaugural speech, and I was born like right after midnight. So it was
that's right.
day kind of thing. So it was January 21st.
Yeah. It's such a
lot of people don't know that, by the way. This is probably going to shock people.
It's interesting. I just want to talk about that fast turnaround from signing up and then deploying.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I have a very different story. I was in the National Guard.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and I deployed. But there's a long distance between when I joined and when I deployed. And so, in other words, I had years to think about what a deployment would be like. I'm interested about joining and then deploying so fast.
Our drill sergeants, it was a really amazing time because it's the real deal. People go into the military for different reasons, right? In fact, the recruiters now, when I served here in the Senate, I was trying to figure out about recruitment. And I talked to the Movement Center of Excellence and the command down there. It's Army and Infantry and Armor. And they're having all these recruiting problems. And I was trying to figure out how I can help in little ways. And they said, college, people join for college, right? So when we were offering to pay college debt, the military it's one of them unintended consequences of trying to do something good, right? For people, you never think of those, right? But it really affected. It was like a lot of people joined because of college. For me, and at that time, a lot of people like me were like, let's go get some. I want to go do the job and the front lines come. There was a lot of folks that wanted to do the job. And so the drill sergeants, they would tell us like, you guys, this is the real deal. Like you guys who are just coming in right now are in it.
It's really interesting. I'll bring up David Eastman because he had a lot of thoughts on this. He was constantly trying to pass bills that would make it so the National Guard didn't go overseas.
Really?
Yeah, and it was weird because as somebody who served in the National Guard, people want to deploy.
Oh,
and I think that I don't know that
Totally.
folks understand. I think they're
You
like,
want
oh,
to do
you have to
your job,
deploy. But actually, that's what you train for, and that's what you think about. And
And the military sucks in garrison. You
yeah,
sit and
it's so
you're like,
stupid.
it's like cutting the grass with scissors and turning rocks over and finding things to do to train.
It's really hard to explain that you want to deploy. No one ever wants to describe a deployment as fun, but it's different. And it depends on the deployment.
You're totally right. Yeah. It's hard to explain that to people who don't understand because it's just counterintuitive, right? There was a lot of times like we used to explain it like it's maybe 30 days of sheer boredom for 10 seconds of horrible terror or whatever, like a day.
And I deployed to Kosovo, or 9 months of boredom.
Yeah.
There was never terror, but actually lots of people's deployments were like that.
Oh, yeah,
like
yeah.
you were part of a generation where there was a lot of action.
We had a lot of it's really weird. It's like you want to do your job, and when you're on a battle tank, our job is a very specific one. You're paid to do one thing. Like if somebody threatens us, we're paid to eliminate them. And And it takes 6 to 8 support people for every one combat arms soldier, right? It's a lot goes into it. And it's like the Super Bowl, right? When somebody picks a fight, I remember we went into Karbala. So we were 10 days away from redeploying home. We had been there for a year in Baghdad. And this was 2004 was the end of it. We got there in 2003, right at the beginning of the war, right after 3rd ID had pushed up to Baghdad from Kuwait. They fought their way up there, and the Marines just came through and bulldozed Baghdad. And then we came right behind them when there's still smoking holes in buildings from airplane bombs and all that. And we were 10 days away from going home. We had sent some of our tanks home and everything, and all the stuff. I'll never forget, we had a big formation. And they said, we've been cordially invited to stay in the beautiful country of Iraq for an undetermined amount of time. And everybody just, you could feel the anger, like just brewing. People were furious. And they said, and it gets better. The people in Karbala have car bombed our Polish special forces friends, and they picked a fight with us, and we're going down there to fight them. And so then everybody was like, oh yeah, all right, perfect. Like it was this huge amount of aggression, and it was on an army that it was Muqtada al-Sadr's Shia rebel army in Karbala. They'd taken over like one of the holiest mosques in Islam there. The local people did not want them there. So for us, it was like, we're going to take out all of our aggression on people that want to fight us. And they're doing bad things in local communities. They're terrorizing not just us, but the locals. And so we actually earned a presidential unit citation for that mission, which the last one my unit had earned was for the Battle of the Bulge. It was a pretty big deal. So as it turns out, they used this as bait, and it was like a 3-week-long firefight, nothing but bullets flying everywhere. And we had really small units. They had hundreds and hundreds of people that we were fighting, and we would send in very small units. We had maybe a tank, I think a company at a time. We'd go in for 24 hours and come out for 48 to reset, get sleep, fix the tanks, gas up, and go back in. And yeah, it was wild. Just like the horrible experience it was, in a weird way, was one of the most memorable, I think, in terms of purpose, right? Because you don't want to say it was a good time, right? But because it wasn't a good time, but it was it felt meaningful. Like we were doing what we were trying to do, and we were doing it for people that needed our help.
When you say you would go back and get sleep, did you sleep well in Iraq?
You know, people famously, like, I slept in Karbala. I'd be like, I need a quick minute of sleep. And we were dismounted in this building, which it turned out they were using us as bait. They sent small contingencies of us in, and they would dismount us from the tanks, which we had no training to do. And we were in this building, and they wouldn't let us advance. And there were snipers everywhere, and we got shot at every day. And so all of us were pretty furious. So we thought it was a pretty stupid plan. Let us advance. We're sitting here and waiting to die. And in hindsight, it was a brilliant idea because it worked, and we didn't touch the mosque. The mosque didn't have one bullet hole in it, which was the goal. It would have been a big deal. You don't want to hurt their religious monuments and all that. You really would have. We don't want to do that. So yeah, so it worked, but at the time it was just miserable because we were losing people. You know, our platoon was about half power when we were done. So the tank platoon is 16 people. Each tank crew is 4, and there's 4 tanks in a platoon. So we had 16 people, and I think by the time we were done with Karbala, my platoon was down to 8. So we had one killed. My friend Cronkite was hit by an RPG. It was a horrible deal. That was rough. And my platoon leader, the LT, was shot. That was actually really funny. One bullet made 4 holes. It went through both of his ass cheeks.
Oh my God.
Which is almost hard to even
Imagine.
Believe. But he was in Alaska he went into simulations, and so we'd go to the military order, the Purple Heart. And
I see. If it went in here,
it went through both cheeks.
Right, so 4 holes.
Yeah, and it's really funny, but it actually was really close to being really bad. But we knew he'd live at the time, which helped. And I actually, funny thing, I videotaped a lot when I was there because I knew this was really significant. And so I wanted to document what I could, and I have a lot of videotape. But I actually was filming the moment we learned that the lieutenant was shot, which I just realized. I've been going through some of the tape, and I have, a couple hundred hours of video. And it would just brought chills to back at the time when somebody walked up while I was filming. It was like, hey, LT just got shot. And I was like, what? It was crazy. It was really a weird time. And when at the time there was really effective snipers that had gotten a lot of our folks. We lost a few guys to that. Several close friends were wounded terribly.
I watched you on Huckabee sing a song about that you'd written with one of your friends.
Yeah, I played on there a couple times. He was so great. I almost hung up the phone when they called. I thought it was a joke. It's weird how that happened, really. I don't think anybody really knows how that happened.
How you got hooked up?
Yeah.
So to be clear for listeners, Mike Huckabee, governor of Arkansas, had a talk show, I guess, on Fox News.
It was called Huckabee on Saturdays on Fox News. He did like slice of life stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of it was religion. You know, he's a Christian guy, and so you like to talk about stuff, faithful stuff, and that kind of thing. But for me, when I got wounded, I got hit in both the lower extremities.
And tell us about how that happened.
So I was talking about Karbala. This fast forward a year, this was my second deployment, and we were in Ramadi. So my tank battalion was the most decorated tank battalion in the Army. They loved to take us from wherever we were, and if there was bullets flying somewhere else, they'd move us across the whole country to go there and fight. We did that a bunch of times. So at the time, we were on the border of Syria in Sinjar, and there was a fight in Ramadi, and so they took our whole brigade of tanks and put them on trucks called Hets and moved us all down to Ramadi, which was a huge effort to go help the Marines. And we had a SEAL team attached to us, and so we had the first SEAL that was actually Debbie Lee, who started TAPS, I think. Her son, Mark Lee, was one of the memorial services that we played music for that my friend did. I think I was wounded at the time, but he was the first SEAL killed. They were attached to our unit. So Ramadi was pretty crazy. It was like the third time I had gone out in sector. Like when we were in Baghdad, I was out all the time. We were all over the city. And in Ramadi, it was like, I don't know, I'm probably more than 3 times, but I had barely been out of sector. I had been driving on a combat escort they're escorting the tanks from Syria, from the border of Syria, not in Syria. We were in Sinjar on the border. And it was hundreds of miles that we took these tanks on these trucks. And so the last leg of that trip was from Baghdad to Ramadi, and it was like the most deadly highway in the country. And we drove it there and back every day. It was like a I forget now, but like a 10-hour ordeal there and back. Like there'd constantly be flaming vehicles on the side of the road that were just blown up. We'd be driving through every day and bringing tanks. So we were on the gun trucks that would work as security in the convoy of tanks that were going down that were on trucks. So did that every day for a good long time until the whole entire unit had gone down. So there were many people that were already out working in sector with the Marine Corps. By the time I got there, it was a little bit later. So on June 26th is when my roommate and I went out. He was gunning. He was on the gun up outside of the gunner's hatch of the Humvee. And I was driving. And yeah, we had made our destination where we're building a combat outpost. So we were putting big concrete barriers in there to provide security in a part of downtown Ramadi. We'd just started, only been there that morning. And we got there, we got out of the car. I think I was smoking or something. There was a New York Times reporter right next to us, along with our entire chain of command, and they were all out talking. And he was there with the brigade commander was right there. And my entire chain of command was right there. And a mortar fell. And it was maybe 150 yards in front of him, maybe 200 meters, I think, or something. It was close enough to where you're a little scared, but we didn't get shrapnel.
I just want to point out, like for listeners, that it was very unusual for your entire chain of command to be there. That's
very unusual. It was bizarre. Like it just happened. They weren't even there for long. Like they were.
In fact, like they purposely aren't always together.
Very much so. And they were there because of this New York Times reporter that I think we were on the cover of the New York Times when we were in Karbala like 5 times. Like they seemed to love to like. Our unit was just all over. And so Ramadi was this big deal, and they were escorting this reporter around. We had a lot of problems with the press. And now I understand a little bit more as a politician, but I remember when we got our first TV over there, I was going to pick up an interpreter. We had an interpreter shack because they were in way more danger than we were. They sacrificed their lives for our mission there to help them. And we try to have them on base so that we could protect them. They earn that and way more. And I remember walking in and they had just gotten a TV and they were all sitting there watching CNN. And they're like, what are you guys telling your people? And not to bash anybody, but it's like politics can, I understand now a little bit more how politics can drive a narrative and you don't know whether, I've even been a part of it unknowingly at times, but that's a tough.
Well, I have a couple of things to say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or not. But first of all, I'd say it's good that the reporters were there with you.
No, totally, yeah.
And they were watching it on the ground. They
absolutely
were present.
Yeah, that was the goal, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
So there should be more accurate reporting coming from reporters who are in the field with you or on the ground. That said, I'm just flashing back to Vietnam and knowing that the president, or presidents plural, had a narrative that they wanted the media to report. And there was a strong pressure for the media to report a narrative that reporters on the ground were not seeing.
True story.
But they weren't allowed to talk about what they were saying.
No.
So I think I just want to throw that in there because I think it's really easy to bash the media.
Yeah, to be clear, I wasn't trying to bash the media. More, I'm trying to say that I understand a little bit more how these things can happen. It's easy to demonize. I used to say when I was here, it's a lot easier to demonize things than it is to explain them, which is why we end up getting so angry at things. I think that's part of it. But I can understand a little bit better of how you could be really concerned but get a narrative wrong. And so that was our goal, was that we wanted the press to be seeing the real story because we were proud of what we were doing there. And when we would hear, because I still have Iraqi friends. One of them's in California. I just visited him recently and he's proud to be here. He was excited about what we were trying to do in the country. And it was so much deeper than political talking points on either side. There's a lot of right and wrong. So I wasn't so much to bash people.
Hey, we've totally veered off. So you are... setting up the cement blocks. Your whole chain of command is there. You've just gotten there. Mortar is dropped 200 meters away.
So then I turn on Fox News and the goddamn press. No, I'm just kidding. No.
So you're there. There's a reporter there from New York Times.
Yeah. So
you're with your roommate.
Yeah. And so the reason I bring that up is because I remember, and you can understand this being from a military unit, like seeing that level of leadership on the ground, you get a feeling of, okay, there's a level of safety here. Yeah.
100%.
Right? They're protecting these people.
That they wouldn't be there if it wasn't safe.
So that's the reason I bring that up, is because seeing that, people in the military maybe understand real quick, like seeing that my whole chain of command is standing there, there's this level of safety, like you
can relax.
They roll around with a pretty decent security team, and we are a security team, so we felt pretty comfortable. And the last thing I think we expected at that moment was a mortar attack, because we were downtown and we had just got there that morning to set up a long-term, what we call a combat outpost. And it was pretty hostile, but for them to drop mortars with the accuracy that they were dropping them, we were fighting people who knew what they were doing. There was known to be a lot of military folk in that area, like good military people came from that area. So a mortar round fell directly in front of our Humvee, and it was far enough to where we didn't feel shrapnel, but it was close enough to where
you're like, oh crap.
If they start walking them in, like if they have a spotter, like you do with mortars, they're just going to get real close real fast. So I was like, man, we should get in the Humvee. And Terry was like, yeah, let's get in. And man, my whole first deployment, we didn't have up armored Humvees. We just took the doors off. We had like thin plastic, and we weren't bulletproof either. We had like flak jackets that they had in Vietnam. And we just rolled through Iraq in Baghdad, not knowing who the enemy was. It was pretty wild. Just ripped the doors off. And that was a wild time. It was definitely, for thrill seekers, it would be a dream. It was pretty crazy. And so the first mortar fell, and we were getting in the vehicle, and I remember reaching for the door handle, and just all of a sudden I was ringing like a bell, and I couldn't see anything, and trying to figure out what just happened. I like stumbled forward I had just about reached the driver's handle when all of a sudden just my bell is ringing and smoke, and I don't know what just happened. And I remember taking a second to like all of a sudden, I don't even know. It was maybe a split second, felt like a long time. What just happened? And I remember taking a step and I felt crunch in my foot. And I was like leaning on the Humvee, like leaning forward toward it at this point because I had just about reached the handle. And I like leaned forward into the handle and I took a step to get inside and I just crunched. My foot didn't work. And I thought, oh shit, this is bad. And so I jumped into the vehicle and I was training happens fast. Like I was a combat lifesaver. We did training where we do IVs, and which I have pictures of that. It was really wild.
We don't do that anymore.
Yeah, I loved it. We have pictures.
I know, it's just like
we're smoking in the dirt, and we had blood all over, and stabbing each other.
It's fun for people to do, but wasn't actually saving lives.
Yeah, it wasn't fun for me. Sometimes in the barracks, we were pretty rowdy, and we could drink on a Friday night. And I would argue that on a Saturday when we would put IVs in people, we probably did save lives. True story.
So you jump in, your foot's all messed up. What happened right then?
Yeah. So then Terry had just gotten up while simultaneously while I
you
was
were driving.
Yeah, I was driving. So simultaneously, before I had stepped toward the driver's door, Terry was jumping up from the back bumper of the Humvee to jump in the gunner's hatch. So when I reached the door and my bell was ringing and I realized Terry wasn't in the gunner's hatch. And right then I saw him fall off the driver's side of the Humvee. And that's when I kicked into high gear. Like I had one field dressing and I knew my wound was bad, and I just remembered that my whole chain of command was just outside. I don't know where they are. So I thought we have a mass casualty here, and it's really high level VIPs. So I was bandaging my wounds. I was hitting both legs. One of them was just clipped the Achilles tendon in the back, but it was still attached. So that one was okay, and it wasn't bleeding to the point where, but my right foot, I took about a quarter-sized piece of shrapnel right through my ankle, through the subtalus. I don't know. So it was about a quarter-size hole right through. And so that was bleeding. By the time I figured out that I needed to do my own field dressing, the whole Humvee floor was covered in blood. So I knew it was pretty bad. Like it was a good solid.
And bones bleed. Like for people who don't know, like there's a lot of blood.
Yeah.
So a hole through. Yeah. And taking out part of the bone.
And there's a lot of
vessels. Going to be, very vascular. It's a lot of blood. Yeah,
it was. And you have arteries going down that way behind. But I didn't see any that would be like light colored, right? So it looked like darker. So I thought, you
just got to go tight.
I'm going to have so tourniquet, almost a tourniquet kind of thing. So that's what I did. I used the field dressing and tried to do as much pressure on my left. And then I did my bootlace. I used my bootlaces and I tried to do a good tourniquet. I did pretty good. I was pretty proud. I stopped the bleeding and I had to do it real fast, right? So I was smoking through that. And right as I was going to open the Humvee door, it all happens fast. I looked up and I saw my battalion commander. The lieutenant colonel had dove through the smoke in this dramatic. We still didn't have a lot of visibility. The smoke was like, so time, I don't know exactly what the time frame was. It all happened pretty fast, but I saw him dive onto Terry Lisk, and that's when I just was like a sigh of relief because he had been obviously standing with the chain of command in this New York Times reporter, and so I knew that, okay, they're not all casualties, and the battalion commander is moving very quickly, and so he's mobile. And so he's helping Terry. So I knew they were getting him a medevac, so I waited and didn't tell anybody that I was wounded. So I made sure that my bootlaces had a tourniquet going on. And so now I was in the Humvee alone. It's funny, the truck commander, the TC, was Sergeant Shannon, who was looked like a football player. Like he was really in shape, and he ended up going from there to be White House transportation. And I would hear from him from time to time, but he went a little dark. But I always laughed because at the time I took a lot of pride in that I was the calmest person there. And when he came up to the vehicle and he had just been really shaken, he was like breathing heavy, and he got into the vehicle and Lisk had just been taken away, and Lisk was really bad. I knew it was really bad. So I waited until they medevaced him. And so then Sergeant Shannon gets in the vehicle. And I remember I looked over and I said, hey, I don't want you to freak out right now. And he just looked at me and his eyes were real big. And I was like, but I'm going to need a medevac. And he was, and it's funny looking back because he was like, just lost his mind. Fucking what? You need a what? And I'm like, I don't freak out. Like I need, and so we have a radio in the Humvee, but he it just, everything was crazy at the time. And he jumps out of the Humvee and started running toward the cop. And I was yelling, there's use the radio. We got a radio. And I don't know, there must have been a group right inside. They came out and got me, and it was this like 30-minute ride. I remember the medic who came, he's like the C6, and he was like, I was fully conscious and everything. The reason that I was able to handle it so well is I think part of it was I never looked at my wound. So I didn't experience shock. At least it wasn't to the level that it would have been. If I had seen that wound, I would have been in shock. I'm almost certain. I don't pass out with needles, but it was just by the looks of the faces of the people who looked at it, was like, I'm glad I didn't look at it. So I was pretty calm, and it started to hurt. And the C6 was, I need to take off these bandages. And I was like, no, it's fine. I got it good and snug, and I can make it to the aid station where the surgeons are. Let's just go. And he was like, I'm the fucking medic, and I'm going to take off your bandage, and I'm going to look at you. And I was like, okay, all right.
Hey, this is me, like total armchair quarterbacking from 20 years later. You should have left him on.
Yeah,
like you were right. He was wrong.
He was so wrong. And I'm like, okay, all right, man, you do you. Like, I'm not a doctor right here. But I'll never forget. That's why I laugh so hard at that. Because it's like, he took off my bandage of the foot that was rough, or the bootlace and stuff, and he took off my boot. And so the New York Times had a picture of my just blood-soaked boot on with the like dust, and with Sergeant Shannon in the background, like it looks chaotic, right? So that was a New York Times photo that he did in this blog that he was doing. But he looked up at me like I'm laying on this litter in the back of this 113. It's like an aluminum personnel carrier that they use to transport. I'm laying on the stretcher in the back, and he's down at my feet. And I remember he like leans forward and looks up at my face, and he goes, this a quote. He was like, oh, no worries, man. It's just a flesh wound. And like in the same breath, he turned over his shoulder and said, I need a fucking tourniquet. He started yelling. And so the whole way into the aid station, I was like, I'm awake, you idiot. I'm sitting right here. Why would you do? And so I'm like yelling at this guy about it. And he was taking it like a champ. He's like, yeah, just take out all your aggression on me. That's fine. And I was just yelling, you idiot, I'm bleeding. I can even make it. And so then morphine started to kick in when I got to the hospital. And then I was belligerent.
Were you married then?
Yeah. So crazy. You'd asked about that earlier. Like it was a wild experience. I was newly married, and we were expecting. And so when I came back, medevac to Germany, which is where I was stationed. I was in Germany for 6 years. My wife is from Poland. She had never even been to the United States before. And
how did y'all meet?
We met in Germany. It was so weird. Like I had tried to avoid a love interest, and I almost made it the whole time. And we met. I was playing music with some people. I met her where we lived in Germany in Friedberg. And she was expecting, and I came back, and I went into surgery in one hospital, and she went into labor in another.
Wow.
And she had just gotten us an apartment on the German economy on the third floor of an apartment building, and they don't have the ADA there.
Oh my God.
So there's no elevator. Yeah. So I've become a big fan. It's funny how you start to understand the value in some things that you never would, that you maybe always take for granted, right? Things like the ADA. Right. You don't know the difference till you see the difference. Right. So every day like a gallon of milk was a miserable disaster. I'll show you. So because of those flights of stairs, I have these giant screws in my ankle, and I just got x-rays of them because it's been really giving me a hard time. But I just got x-rays of my foot, and for 20 years, this big screw has been in there, and it's been broken in half.
Oh my God.
This metal screw is broken in half, and it was no doubt from that stairway.
Are they going to fix it?
I haven't let them unless it's inside of the bone. It's now it's just a memory of what probably sucked really bad at the time.
So you thought this is just the pain that you have after this injury, when in fact it was because you had a broken screw.
Yeah.
Not doing the job it was supposed to be doing.
Totally. And I was in so much pain, and people just wouldn't have realized. And so I drink. And the military is, here, take this Motrin and drink water. And I was like, I'm going to drink this fifth of vodka and pass out, because it was really difficult. And at the same time, when I got back, the day I got out of convalescent leave from the hospital, I had found out that my best friends, Shane Woods, who was from Palmer, Alaska, is the reason I'm here, his family. Shane Woods was a very close friend, and Aaron Jager, who was like a mentor to me, he was my guitar teacher, and he wrote these memorial songs with me. And the day I got out of the hospital, I found out they both were killed. While I was on my way into the base, I got a call from Aaron's wife, who I lived with them. I lived above they had a maid's quarters above their house in Germany.
In Alaska?
Yeah, that was Shane. After I had gotten a job in politics, it's funny, I wrote the governor of Minnesota one day, and I was like, I walk around and there's all these Texan flags, and I don't even know what ours looks like. And so I'd really appreciate if you'd send me a flag, because the military's not from Texas, right? So I want a flag of Minnesota, because it's just, this is all Texas. And I was bored, so that was something to do, and I wanted a flag. And so they wrote me this letter back and said, we'll send you a flag, but you got to send us like $35.99 or whatever.
Shut up.
Yeah, I swear to God. And so I got that letter, and I just was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. I'm going to have fun with this. I'm going to write the dumbest, most sarcastic letter, because I'm bored. When we're off duty, I have nothing to do. And it was the beginning of the war, and in 2003, and we had nothing. And so I would just sit there and write, and I wrote a really funny letter. It wasn't mean. It was just like, okay, somebody who doesn't know what they're doing sent me this. And so I wrote this letter that I'm sure got attention, and it was very funny. It was like, when I come back, I'm going to have to talk to you guys. I'd love to send you. I haven't seen a quarter in just about a year, so I don't even remember what it looks like. But when I get back, I'll give you one if you just borrow it to me till I get back from war. It just really so funny. Oh God, it was funny. Yeah. And they didn't mean it was a cookie cutter response letter. Right. Again, now working in politics, I see clearly how those are just, people don't mean to make them. Everybody tries to do their best. So it was a new staffer who was just trying to do something right. It's technically I was supposed to pay for the flag, but I wasn't able to, and they didn't put a lot of thought into it. So because of that, the governor's office was sending me care packages like weekly.
They're trying to make up for that terrible letter.
Yeah. And as you can imagine, the command was really starting to wonder why the governor was writing me all the time, because it would be from the letterhead of the governor's office, but it would be like these weird things like Maxim magazines, and they were sending me really cool stuff, actually. Staff would throw in stuff and they would mail it. And I was like, God, these people are pretty cool. I didn't know much about politics at the time. So anyways, that's how I got first connected. That was Governor Pawlenty in Minnesota. But I forget what's the question?
How'd you get to Alaska?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, God. Yeah. Okay. So back to Minnesota. God, I'm getting good at this politics, right? The spin. I don't even know where I went. Okay. I worked in politics because of that. I came back. So that was where I was going. Governor Pawlenty was great to me. I learned his staff. I got back. They invited me to play music on his radio show with them. I knew nothing about politics at the time.
And had you been playing music before you even joined the Army?
Yeah, my whole life. Music was really meant a lot to me. And this was a really tough time because my position in the battalion, other than being a battle tank crewman, was every time we had a KIA, I was the first person that they would tell, so that I could write a song in 3 days and play it at their memorial and record it for their family while I was doing missions. That sounds cool and everything, but I always had an issue with imposter syndrome. I was like, I play for fun for me. I'm not a songwriter. One of these songs is going to suck really bad, and it couldn't be for a bigger cause, right? It was really stressful times. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be in that role and that kind of attention. And every time it seemed to be a closer friend. And so we'd be writing these songs and just this horrible, like, so after all that in politics, I played a song. I didn't want to play music anymore. And I kept getting these calls, and kind of that's how the Huckabee show came up. I was on all this morphine. And I met this documentary filmmaker in Baghdad. He showed up at our gate in like a Hawaiian t-shirt with a camera, and he was from Australia. And I was like, dude, you're going to die. What are you doing? He had this little Iraqi, half his size was his bodyguard, he said. And his name was George Giddos. Actually, since he's won the Australian Peace Prize, and he was a pretty interesting guy. And he was making these documentary films, and he was making one on music and war. So through him, I had a lot of attention because his documentary played on VH1, and I had no idea where this stuff was going to go. But it ended up being this big deal. And so through him, the press, when I was wounded, I was getting all these phone calls from people, and I was just bored and on all kinds of medication and alone in my house. And the only English speaking channel I had was CNN. And so I was about going crazy. Like in German economy, I speak a little German enough to get by, but I was just losing my mind. And every time somebody would call, they'd be like, hey, could we ask you some questions? I would keep them on the phone. Yeah, I want to die.
Don't hang up.
Totally. And so I didn't even know who they were. And one of them turned out to be a guy writing a dissertation for Syracuse. And I was like a big topic in his book that ended up being early honors grad material for the University of Minnesota, like with me, a big chapter on me. And it was called Sound Targets, about music and war, which is funny because I never been to college. And I was like, we're making history. We don't need to study it or whatever. But it was really a wild time. I wasn't prepared for any of that. Like one day the Huckabee show called, and they were like, hey, Governor Huckabee wants you to be on his show. And I was like, really funny. But I just was like going to hang up on them. And they said, no, this is for real. This is the real deal. And so they flew us all to New York. And it was really, I don't know. It was
from
tough.
Germany?
No, I was in Minnesota at the time.
You went back. So after you recovered, you and your wife moved to Minnesota?
No.
Oh, okay. Because then you worked for the governor there.
Yeah.
And they did political work.
So they left, they discharged me from the military. Gotcha. My unit closed down. I was there until they basically closed the gates. It was where Elvis Presley was. It's Ray Barracks in Friedberg, Germany. And they closed the gates and they divested and moved us all out. So with me, it was like, what are they going to do? What are we going to do with me? So they sent me home, and I was still on crutches. Like it was just a weird, rough time. And it was right during the Walter Gate, the Walter Reed scandal, where people were dying in their rooms and they didn't even know they were there. So it was right during that. And I never went to Walter Reed. I was in Germany, because that's where I was. I actually asked to stay in Germany. Yeah, after all that was really stressful. And I came back, and just the governor on that radio show that I was on with him, it was the first time I ever met him. And he put down the headset and during the ad break, and he like came running around the table, and I wasn't ready for that. And he said, do you need a job? That's really great. Do you need a job? We need to hire you. What his chief of staff was there. And I knew nothing about politics. So in hindsight, I feel ridiculous, but it shocked me so much that this governor was like, where do you want to work? What do you want to do? Do you want a job?
This was Governor
Pawlenty. And the only thing I knew, like, it shocked me so much. It was like, I don't kill people anymore. And he was like, they thought that was really funny. And I was like, what does this guy want me to do for him? I don't know anything about politics. So I look back and I feel like an idiot, but at the time they laughed real hard. They still laugh about that, I think. But I didn't know what to say. They were like, do you want to work in transportation? Do you want to work in what agency? And I really had no idea. Government wasn't, and I was an artist. I like to play music, and I was a warrior. I was good at being a battle tank crew. I was good at what I did. So anyways, I said, I'm good at that, and I'm good at war. What do you have anything that's close to war? And so I ended up on the McCain campaign, and that's how I ended up in politics. And at the time, I worked for the party. They said, oh yeah, this is about as close to war as we get in the private sector.
So your wife was with you in Minnesota with small children, and that's her first experience in America?
Yeah.
Was that easy for her?
What do you mean by that? Minnesota's not a bad place to...
No, I know, but I just think like with a relatively new husband who's a wounded vet who doesn't know what he's going to do with his life, and in a new country with 2 babies.
When people say the first year of marriage is rough, I laugh in their faces. Like, yeah, you have no idea. Like, yeah, this is really rough. Yeah. Like, we had it really rough. It was really crazy.
And you were treating your pain by drinking a 5th of vodka?
Yeah, I was a raging alcoholic. Like, I became over time a very, like, I was definitely, you know, I haven't drank in 11 years actually, which I'm really, that was really a big deal for me because I had become reliant and I was in so much pain, both physically and emotionally, and just, it was chaotic mess. It was horrible. And then just being cut free from the military. And really, they were right. McCain was in the military. He was military. He was pretty...
POW.
And at the time, we had the convention in St. Paul in '08. We had a historic Senate recount when I was right in the middle of all of that. So I got a really big crash course in politics in a real fast way. Really great opportunity to see how the gears turn, right? Like, it was really cool for me. I had to pinch myself because I grew up very poor. I never believed that.
Well, to repeat the question, how did you get to Alaska?
Yeah, so Minnesota, okay, thank you, Rep. Gray, for keeping me out of the spin. Okay, Alaska. So I'm getting there. So after all that, my point to all that was, and I remember it because it was just such a, it's hard to emphasize enough how crazy all of it was for me. It just was remarkable. And so after that, I was exhausted. We were like at the end of the campaign, we were like 20-hour days. And I had this identity issue. And to some extent, I still do.
And I guess like you were functional. When you worked in the campaign, you were still drinking a lot, but you were...
Oh, I was very functional, right? Like we're soldiers, right? Like yeah. I was a soldier. Like
you weren't like a messy drunk when you were working for John McCain's campaign.
No, I was just like any other drunk political. There's many of them, right? Like they're just like lawyers or whatever, right? It's we worked hard and played hard and figured out how to survive.
And also, I want to say my staff was prepping me for this interview with you. And they were like, and he's sober. And I was like, which is perfect because I have one of the most anti-alcohol offices in the building. It's
really?
A very rare thing. Yeah, we run lots of legislation. I believe that Alaska would be a much better place if people drank less alcohol.
I didn't know you're such a prude.
I am.
No, I'm sorry.
Here's the thing, and I've said it multiple times. There are certain issues that I'm the furthest to the right in the building. Gambling, alcohol. I'm raising the age of consent to 18. There are certain issues where no one's to the right of me. But so
that's
alcohol,
interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of folks who are like sober. They will say things all the time. I don't care about the people drink. I am not sober. I do drink. I want everyone to drink less. I want everyone would be happier, healthier.
Yeah.
We'd have less suicide, less domestic violence, less child abuse.
So back to me. No, I'm just joking. I'm sorry.
The point was that
my jokes are terrible. My jokes are terrible. I should have warned you. Did they warn you? My jokes are horrible. Thank you for laughing. I appreciate that. I have a bunch of questions there too because I have and I'll get back, I promise. But that's a really intriguing point to me because I've often really battled with this difference in political service between what I believe and what is right for people that I represent. Like, how do you, for example, just because I don't drink, that's a me thing, right? Like other people are able to drink just fine. Like I became very allergic to it, right? When I would drink, I would break out in these squad cars and handcuffs and like weird things. And
were you really getting arrested?
Oh yeah. No, when my family fell apart, and
I get you were getting arrested when you were young. Oh. I'm talking about like you're working for the McCain.
Yeah. Well, after that, I got a DUI. It's just a matter of time. Like I was a ticking time bomb. Like you can't function for
with Kawasaki and Chris.
That was so ridiculous. I have to say, Scott really. So
that's a whole other story. I know we're flashing forward a million years, but
this really crooked trooper pulled us over. I had picked up Scott.
Senator Scott Kawasaki. Was he
Senator Scott Kawasaki came down to Anchorage from Fairbanks. Uh-huh. It was me and Scott, and he said, hey, could you grab me to go to the Kenai Classics? I don't have a ride, and he had flown in from Fairbanks. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll pick you up. And it was like 10 a.m. on, I think, a Saturday or a Friday. It was just the weekend for him, and we're going to a fishing event. you can't blame a guy who does cut loose for that kind of a weekend. When I used to drink, I would have been doing the same thing, to be honest. But I didn't notice that he had a beer. Like, I don't watch, I haven't drank in 11 years.
You're like 10 in the morning.
Yes, and it's like this craft beer. It's good for people to understand the truth. The truth is important. Like, he was outside of someone else's house, and you don't have a place to dispose of that. So I don't even know if I don't even know if it came from the night before and it was empty. It wasn't full. It wasn't like he was pounding beer. They made it sound like, this is another thing I learned, how these narratives can spin up just based on bias, because that story was so different than. The reality was, it was a very crooked trooper, and I was going to fight it in court. I was so mad about it because they gave me an open container and he refused to give me a breathalyzer. And I asked for one 3 times. I said, no, you don't understand. I really want a breathalyzer. And he said, nope.
That's crazy.
It was unbelievably, I was furious. And we never told him, like, do you know who we are? You know what I mean? I was like, Scott, don't tell them we're legends. Don't, whatever you do.
Then it'll be worse.
Yeah. And it shouldn't matter. It should not matter. And I didn't know at the time that we had even a reason to pull us over. So what I found really funny is that I don't know, the whole thing was weird, but before I could even fight it in court, the trooper was arrested for rape or something of like minors.
So since we're here, we're going to skip to, you're in Alaska, and you are going to run for the House. Let's just go there.
Okay.
You were 2 years in the House, and then you were in the Senate for 2 years.
So, Minnesota.
And I know that you worked for Don Young.
Yeah.
So
it's a really quick jump. Yeah. So I'm in Minnesota. All that's over with. I'm exhausted, trying to figure out the identity piece. Like, who am I and all that. And I decided that what I want to do is I want to bring families of fallen soldiers. I want to go visit them and meet my friends' families who we lost. So did that a bunch and ran around. Shane Woods' family is here in Alaska, and they invited us to come up. So I came up to visit their family. I met Congressman Young's staff and never left. They said, have you ever thought about moving here? And I said, what the hell?
At what point? So you got sober 11 years ago. So 2014,
2014. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you worked. And you started working for Congressman Young in what year?
2010.
Okay. So
yeah.
You still had a few.
So actually, I wonder if I would even be alive if it weren't for Congressman Young's office, to be honest with you. I remember there was one day, it probably saved my life. Alcoholism is a weird thing. It's like, I wanted to stop drinking, and it didn't know how, and it seemed impossible. And it's hard to fathom something like that for somebody who doesn't experience it, I imagine. It was hard for me to figure out when I was active in it, but I couldn't stop, and I didn't know why. And I was really miserable about it. And millions of other people experienced that, right? People that you work with can, you know things about the people you work with, or you should know your neighbors, right? And I'll never forget, I was called into the office and they were like, hey, you got a couple options here. It just busted it out. And they're like, you could go and do a rehab program and we'll give you a raise, or you can find a different job. And I was like, I couldn't even believe it, because coming from the military, it's like, I didn't even realize that I didn't even want to ask for a month or whatever. I can't be away from it. I'll be invaluable. And
you were in DC, and it was your wife?
No, I wouldn't work in DC.
Oh, you worked from Alaska the whole time?
No, yeah, I stayed in Alaska. There wasn't enough money in the world to get me to go to DC. I wouldn't do that at the time. But I stayed here, and I was so happy that I had the opportunity. Like, it wasn't just now I'm letting everybody down and I'm leaving and I'm all screwed up. And all the things, like, it was the opposite. It was like, I have the permission to get well. And that's all I needed.
The first day that you woke up where you felt good after quitting drinking?
I experienced a lot of really horrible physical things. When I quit drinking, maybe you have what they call the pink cloud, where it's like you really feel good. You notice it's very noticeable. So I had the pink cloud where I was like, yeah, I think I want this. I had been to rehab when I was 16 too. And I just wasn't I was in a survival situation. I don't care about getting well. I'm going to figure out how to survive. I don't have a problem. I can drink just fine. Back then, I had a keychain that said I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy. And like, I was known for off-roading sporadically in cornfields.
So anyway, you had a pink cloud.
Yes. So Minnesota.
Please, God. No more Minnesota. You cannot go back to Minnesota.
No, I ain't going back. I ain't going back. No.
Okay, so you were saying you had some physical effects.
This is fun.
You were trying to get to the physical effects part. I have so many.
He's got to go. He's got a lot of questions. Oh my God, it's 2:45.
I know. I have a committee, but we're going to get to
We haven't even got to you yet.
I know.
All right. Okay. So what was the question?
You said you had some physical effects, some negative physical effects.
Oh,
like
yeah. So there's Big Cloud, okay. And I went to Breakthrough at Providence, and I really loved it. I ended up running a marathon later with my counselor there, who became a very good friend. Yeah.
With a broken screw in it?
Another long story, but I got a device called IDEO at the time. It was invented by DoD folks at the Center for the Intrepid Military's Cutting Edge Prosthetics Lab. And Jason Suslovich from Don Young's office was touring the facility. He was the military aide in DC, and he was touring the facility, and he was like, hey, we got a guy that might. And so the only reason I found out about that place that gave me this brace that allowed me to run again was because of our staff so I'm very grateful for that. So I'm going through all these. So that had just happened. Right. And so now I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I want a different life. I want a healthier one. And so, yeah, after this pink cloud, it must've been 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I forget exactly the timeline, but it was when I had detoxed, I got really sick, weird sick. I got pneumonia. I got MRSA, like the staph infection. Like I had big lumps on my neck. It was really bizarre. And the only thing I can imagine is this was a detox thing, that I had drank so much for so long regularly that I don't know. I was bizarre. I was eating healthy and all that. And so it must have been a detox thing in my immune system coming back to life, maybe. And after that, it was great. Yeah. Yep. I had little things here and there, but.
How old were your daughters when you got sober?
Gosh, I can tell you. Yeah, let's do the
6?
math. I wasn't on the finance committee, so I'm not.
6 and 7,
math
maybe?
ain't my. I'm just kidding. Yeah, they were. That sounds about right. 7 and 8.
So that's great, because
7
that
and
way,
8.
like, their memories of their dad is going to be as a sober dad.
Even when I was drinking, I had these weird ethics where I would read the children's Bible to my kids because that's what my mom did to me when I was young. And so I was like, and I'm glad because reading to them they're both like, my daughter is a 4.3 GPA, which I didn't even know was possible. I was just glad to graduate. I didn't think.
Hey, I'm so sorry. It's just, I got to say, what popped into my head when you said I'd read the children's Bible when I was really drunk, it flashed in my head.
When I was really drunk. I didn't read it when I was really drunk.
Did you watch the Whitney Houston interview with Oprah? Where she was like, what did you do when you smoked crack? And she was like, read the Bible.
As you do. Yeah, as you do. Hey, those are the people that need Jesus. So one of my favorite political wasn't it Rob Ford from Toronto, the mayor? And he's like, so I smoke a little crack sometimes.
I remember that.
You remember that?
I remember that.
Oh my God, he doubled down.
That was like crazy.
Yeah, that was really funny. Poor guy, man.
Okay.
Anyways.
So Don Young's office, very helpful. Went through rehab, ran a
Changed my
marathon,
life.
very
Yes.
healthy.
Really.
Worked a little bit for Senator Sullivan.
Yes, Sullivan was elected, and he has his committees, military is his wheelhouse, and I had been really hard charging and had learned a lot of stuff in Young's office, and so his staff.
So then you went to DC.
No, I didn't
You
go to
didn't
DC.
go to
No,
DC.
but I wouldn't work I didn't want to work in DC. I came to Alaska. When Young's office asked me if I wanted to move to Alaska, it was like, I came here for a reason. I'd been through so much. I wanted to be away from people, but I'm such a people person at the same time. Off grid needs to be close to me. So I have a cabin in Willow, or not in Willow, but like out in the Yentna River, like off grid. And I need to escape. So DC is not the place to do that. So I like to go there and I really like to leave, kind of thing at the time.
And so you weren't living in Palmer because you represented
No, I live in
sides?
Anchorage. So
Yeah.
the only reason I stayed in Anchorage was because my kids, we won the lottery for the German immersion school.
Oh, that's where my kid goes.
Yeah, so Rilke Schule, and all my in-laws they don't speak English. They live in
Polish.
Germany and they're
they
Polish.
They needed to go to Polish immersion, but we didn't.
Well, yeah, it would be great to have that. But if only, I wonder who could do something like that. Just kidding.
Honestly, it was so
anyways,
hard to get French
I
immersion
know.
started. That was the most recent one, and French was really hard. It was a big lift, and that's in O'Malley.
Yeah, that's a good one. Hey, you know how come French have bayonets on their rifles?
No.
It's weird. It's so that the muzzles don't get dirty when they surrender. No, sorry, I'm just kidding. I love the French. I'm French Canadian.
Are you really?
Anyways, my grandmother was a La Chapelle from Thunder Bay. Anyways, what was I saying? It's Minnesota. So
You were military Veterans Affairs liaison for Sullivan's office.
right. Yeah, so I had been
And you're living in Anchorage because your kids get to Rilke Schule like my son does.
Yeah, it's a great school. And so we lived in Anchorage so that they had the opportunity to do that. And it was very much
It's a lot of
at my
military people
expense.
at
Like
school.
and I'm glad I did that. It was brutal, though. I did not want to be in Anchorage because
You like to be off the grid.
I love Anchorage. Nothing against Anchorage.
You can get
It's
off
just,
the grid pretty easy.
Yeah, but I needed
You want more
land
space.
where I can live. Yeah, my stuff is spread out. I grew up on a farm, like a hobby farm kind of thing. So I need room, like land.
Okay, we have to go to why you ran for office. And you ran against Charisse Millett?
Yeah. So there was
former
just,
podcast guest, by the way.
nice. Yeah, I like Street. I just ran into her, I think, last week.
So y'all get along now.
I haven't really talked to her, but I don't have anything against her. In fact, in hindsight, I wish I wouldn't. Maybe shouldn't run. But
You beat her in the primary?
yeah, we did. And it was a weird time for me. You don't really understand what goes on here until you're here and you see it. But I had just buried a whole bunch of my friends and trying to reconcile why we're doing what we're doing. And we're doing it with every fiber of our being.
And Iraq was so fucked up.
And then we're wondering what political leadership is in charge of what we're doing and what's our purpose, right? Like, I always knew that strategically being in Iraq is in the pumping heart of the Middle East. You're right in between Iran and Syria. And if it's maintaining peace for the world, for the global economy, because oil flows there, I get that, right? But at the same time, to come back and be exposed to politics, I was a little bit disenchanted, to say the least. I expected these people to be
Plugged in and care.
really, just like the founders, not sleeping and leaving. And so it wasn't so much about just Charisse, but I had this thing where I kept complaining and somebody said, well, finally I got to the point where it was like, you should do something about it or shut your mouth, right? And so then I realized that it was time for me to redeploy. I had done what I needed to do.
Philosophically speaking.
Yes, and I had been in the congressional office for 8 years at that time. And you get beat up. You're answering the phones all the time.
The only people who call are people who are angry in general.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different than here. It's because it's just nonstop annually.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. I think it's hard to put it in perspective. It's like we get 3 calls a day.
Yeah.
On a busy week.
Yeah.
Whereas you guys are getting like hundreds.
Yeah. And then here it's wrapped up into the playoffs and a Super Bowl. And there it's like,
it never ends.
Baseball. You just 5 games a day. Yeah. So you get tired after a while. You get jaded because there's a lot of negativity all the time.
So you ran against Charisse from the right?
I
don't
really know if it was from the right. Like, I don't think it was from the right. Yeah, no, I think it was more like I'm tapped in. And I served and I'm unhappy with our leadership in general. I tried really hard not to. I didn't want to talk about
it. Wasn't personal.
It wasn't personal, yeah.
So you won that primary. Won that race.
Won it. And then Pat Higgins after that. And
was the Democrat.
Yeah. Yep. And he had been a perpetual candidate when I was like a newcomer. And so it was a tough, like.
It's a redder district, though. You had the advantage.
I don't
you were
know.
worried?
It's a redder district. It's Schraggy's district. So it's pretty much the same one. So I don't know that it was red or it just was, it's transient. So I was a worker bee. So every single day, morning to night, managing my own campaign and getting as much help as I could. It was hard to raise money in the primary. It was really
How much did you win by?
like 14 points, I think.
Yeah, you killed it. It's a random district. I get it.
Why I walked.
And you did your work. You did your homework. Which, by the way, Shoggy does as well.
And I had
every damn door.
Yeah. And I just finished my master's thesis, which was on why the polls were wrong in Michigan in the 2016 election cycle. And I'd had all the campaign experience and had a good, just finished.
You were elected in 2018?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I basically finished my MBA thesis on the campaign. So I was really tapped into pollsters and all that and public opinion. So that helped a lot. I was knocking on doors. And then my experience as a waiter in a restaurant, believe it or not, was the single most valuable thing.
And then I guess it flashed over because you got appointed to Chris Birch's seat.
Yeah, so that was all really brutal. That's when stuff really, it was brutal. It was a really tough time for me. I don't know what it looks like from the outside, but it was really challenging. I care about these people, right? I lost a bunch of friends and all that. I didn't mean to. I still trying to figure out where I went from a House minority to like a really split Senate majority and had to now.
Michiki was president?
Yes. And now I really had to consider what I was voting on. And when the FBI showed up at my house, which was terrible.
Why did the FBI show up at your house?
That's what I was wondering. I invited them in and started talking to them. And then they started asking questions. And I was like, wait, am I a target? Like, why would I be a target? And so then that's when they served me with papers, cordially inviting me to testify in front of a federal grand jury for
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You didn't know about any of that.
No.
Yeah. So anyways, it's funny. So it was my first year, like everything that could have went wrong, probably from my perspective,
Your first
for me went wrong. Yeah. And I thought I handled it pretty well. It was just this stress filled up. So it was like I had a campaign fundraiser that I was going to do. And I was nervous because I had just gotten into the Senate and I was trying to do, I had this idea that people were reconcilable and that folks could work together. I didn't realize, I don't know, it was a pink cloud or something, but it was toxic. And yeah, the FBI showed up right before a campaign event and I was trying to raise money as fast as I could behind the curve, trying to keep the Senate seat that I had great respect for Chris Birch. And now to me, it's okay. This not just for this guy, but that I respect, but it was a really big deal to me. And so with all that in mind, I don't want to screw this up. I want to do it right. And I want it for everybody that's owed it. And it was a bigger thing than me. And then the FBI showed up asking me about my votes in the first session and about the binding caucus. Why is the FBI involved in your votes and a binding caucus? Well, that's what I wondered. And so I was like, wow, they left. And so it was actually luckily for me that I invited them in to answer their questions, because the bullshit conspiracy theory that whoever told them was ridiculous, but it was believed. Like I could see how, so the questions that I answered them before, like when it was just natural, there was no reason for me to be a target from the FBI. So who
called the FBI?
I don't even want to get into that. But
you know what? I'm going to tell my staff something really fast. Hey, I'm going to be late for Hess, just so you know. I'm not stopping.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get into that, but it was really where I grew up. It's, just forget that. It's like,
I'm just trying to play it out in my head now, because Governor Dunleavy appointed you to replace Chris Birch. Was there something about your votes being somehow illegal because you were voting to satisfy the governor?
No, I don't know. I don't know about that. I really don't know. All I know is that they came. And do
you know what votes they were concerned about?
They came and asked me some specific things related to arguments that were going on about a binding caucus, which was way blown out of proportion. The whole argument was absurd. It's all semantics, and I don't even know what to say. It's one of them things where like I said at the beginning of the conversation, things are way easier to demonize than they are to explain. like C-SPAN cameras were one of the dumbest things that ever happened to the U.S. House. Like they came in the name of transparency and everybody loved them, and work hasn't happened
And now
since the
everybody
day
just
they
performs
were.
for the camera.
They have their own TV show that we pay for, and work doesn't happen in the cameras. It's campaigning happens, and nobody's going to negotiate on public television. That doesn't work that way. So anyways, like it would, and they told me, yeah, you can't tell anybody. I should have walked right out and had a press conference on my front lawn and before they even left. But you don't expect that. It was the last thing I expected to happen because I didn't do anything wrong. So I was really
Were other folks targets of that investigation?
Yeah, you'd have to ask other people, but I certainly wasn't the only one. But I don't know as far as when I said, am I a target, and they had handed me a summons, then I had to spend a lot of money on a lawyer that came out of my pocket. It's terrifying. And I've done nothing but take bullets for the country. It's really terrifying. And when it's coming clearly from people that you think you should like.
When I was prepped for this interview, I was told to ask you about something that happened in a committee that you served on where you put the brakes on some trans bill and that it created, as I understand it, that you got blown up by your own party.
Oh, it was terrible. Like it was horrible. Yeah, that's another one of the things where it's easier to demonize things than to understand them. It's hard, Paul, I never knew it either. I was probably a perpetrator, but I certainly was, because you don't understand. You're like, why are these boneheads doing this or doing that? You know, what a bunch of idiots. And
they're all corrupt.
Yeah, they're all a bunch of, corrupt. They're corrupt.
That's what they say.
Yeah. When the FBI showed up, it took a whole different meaning. That's not funny. It was horrible. And it's not like it's just so frustrating because how do you explain something when there's a bunch of really propaganda-driven one-liners?
I know.
And it happens in every different facet.
And I guess this is a good way to like transition into your latest chapter, which was when, you worked for Mary Peltola.
Yeah.
I looked at Must Read Alaska, totally dragged you through the mud.
Yeah. Yeah. That's when I started to learn that it's probably not a good idea to generally hang your hat on a political team. It's so emotionally driven and propaganda filled, which means there's a demon. Your enemy's a demon with propaganda, and the ends justify the means because you're in this righteous battle all the time.
I know, and that's totally true. I'm just going to say, there are people who believe that their side is good and the other side is evil. And therefore, even if the other side starts to say things that you agree with,
right, you can't listen.
Must have nefarious reasons.
You're not allowed to listen and it happens on both sides, and it's orchestrated, and it's very deliberate.
And hey, and I'm just going to say, just so it's like a both sides thing, I had to do an interview with UAA student newspaper yesterday, and one of the questions they asked was, what is the Democratic Party doing to combat blah, blah, blah right now? And I was like, what is the Alaska Democratic Party doing?
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know, you'd have to ask the Alaska Democratic Party. And it's funny because I think from the outside, they assume that anybody who has a D after their name should be able to justify everything that the quote unquote party does. Yeah. And I don't know. I can't justify.
Yeah. No, but you're lumped in with that because it's our team and their team. And if you there's a certain groups of issues or special interest folks that if you could you could agree with them most of the times and try and help the cause and you believe in it and everything, then you do one thing wrong and they're coming for your throat.
But do you think you did something wrong by going to work for the Peltola team?
No, absolutely not. Like, why? Maybe according to some, but I don't give a shit what they think. You know what? Mary was like, I don't agree with some of the policy. I'm more libertarian than anything else. I was always I don't want to impose my will onto others as to the extent that we don't have to, and I don't want theirs to impose on me. So in that sense, why is the government involved in all these things to begin with? When we fight over the table scraps, when we grow the government, and we all wonder what the problem is. That to me, that's like a bipartisan problem. When you talk about something like spying on people's cell phones, that's an issue. That's an issue that really brought bipartisan youth together. Hey, wait a second. Why? Why are we giving this authority away to be used against us in this way that it didn't make sense to kids, and it wasn't a partisan thing? It was they shouldn't. What amount of power should the government have? I think that's a reasonable debate, but it becomes something different, right? When propaganda is injected into the conversation, it becomes something very toxic, and it happens very quickly, and it happens to otherwise really intelligent people. Like, it's a powerful thing.
I have two final questions for you. Number one, what are you doing right now?
Yeah. So, you know what? Thanks for asking me, because there's something that I really care deeply about, and it's in jeopardy. And I've always been military oriented, and I'm big into tech and science because we're like on the front lines of some really interesting tech developments. And so we have a program at the University of Alaska Fairbanks and the Geophysical Institute called the Quasi. The whole Geophysical Institute is unbelievably valuable to our state. Like, when I grew up and thought about college, like, I would think about that. They're scientists doing real research in real fields that matter, and everything matters. But these things are cutting edge sciences, and it's just a really valuable program to our state. A lot of people don't understand that. The Quasi program is the drone program. It's the Alaska Center for Unmanned Unmanned Systems Integration.
Yeah, so I did a podcast with Mike Jones from ICER last year talking about possibilities of using drones for transportation of medications, and it's unmanned flights for doing lots of transport in Alaska. Yeah. And I know it's like we're like in the infancy, but there's the potential.
Yeah, we're doing amazing things. And part of the problem is communication a lot of times. So when you look at the sheet that finance saw about what the drone program does, you would think that we're teaching kids how to fly drones safely. When the reality is the director of the program is a physicist with a high-level military clearance that came out of Congress and is doing research. They're not training young pilots as much as they are working with military to solve problems that might save hundreds of thousands of American lives in the future. Like, we're seeing what happened over in Russia and Ukraine. So drones right now are more than, it's not just like kids flying kites.
No.
This is
I totally get it. And I'm talking about unmanned aircraft. We're talking about like it's
not just
drone
aircraft
on the
either.
Street.
No, we had the DOT has a dog at one of them dogs at the Fairbanks Airport.
They've had him in the hallway here before.
Yeah, that was us that brought him in. I was with them. So we're really proud of those things. Are like, people didn't understand. A lot of people got online and they're like, oh, they're playing with these toys.
Right.
But these things have implications that far outreach. We're not just playing with toys. These systems are one day going to be equipped with weapons to use against us, kind of thing. Those in particular things from Boston, Boston Dynamics Labs, I think the Boston Dynamics Lab.
What's your role?
Yeah, so I work for Kathy Mayo and Associates, and we try and work on dual use stuff to build Alaska's economy that way. Dual use is infrastructure that the military uses that civilians also use, where we can get past some of the economies of scale problems that we have in Alaska with a small population. We run into a lot of economies of scale problems of things cost more. So as it relates to these types of things, military is a big presence here in our geographic location on the circumpolar map in relation to, we're a 9-hour flight from every single capital in the Northern Hemisphere. This is the center of the earth in that respect. Alaska is. And so for military purposes, it is a big deal. And so the more we can do those types of things here, it creates jobs. It's amazing sciences, everything from AI to you're looking at computer tech to hopefully quantum computers. I believe quantum computers are going to be the single most disruptive thing that's ever happened to humanity. I truly believe that. And if folks are listening, don't know what quantum computing is, I would highly recommend taking a look at what we're doing with computers right now, because this is all happening and it's happening very fast, and it's going to change the way we interface with reality. Really, it's going to be a really big deal. And this is all happening now, and we can be at the front end of that, at least to defend ourselves. And I think that's really more important now than ever. And Quasi's doing such a good thing. And so I was glad to be able to meet with my representative here, which is Representative Shroggy, and have asked him to help, and he seems to be taking a serious look at that. Yeah, I'm just really concerned, because if we see programs like that,
we have a money problem.
I know.
And the thing is, like, right now in the building, it's about like oil prices are down, stock market is terrible. Right. We don't have any oil money, but we also have a big problem where we don't have any federal money, like potentially cutting all our federal money. I'm talking to people at an event last night, and there are people like, Alaska has to learn to stand on its own 2 feet. And it makes me just die inside. Like they don't understand.
It's hard to understand. Yeah. I didn't understand before. It's frustrating. I hear you. It's very frustrating. But we don't want to experience all those bad things and then a real bad war like on our turf.
I guess last question. What's your feeling right now about the state of things?
To the point where I'm always at peace. Like I learned a few things. Here's an experience that I had in Congressman Young's office when really a light bulb turned on in my head. I was answering the phones. This was years and years ago, probably a decade ago. And I answered the phone and I could hear Fox News blaring in the background. And this gentleman on the phone was he was breathing heavy and he had to be shaving years off of his life just in this chaotic mess, furious at the congressman for something that the congressman wasn't even a part of. It was something that the speaker did, and really it was insignificant. Like it wasn't even it was something that no one should have their blood pressure raised to the level. And this man was just furious. And I remember thinking, God, the congressman has nothing even to do with this. It's not even his thing. And I said, okay, I'll pass on the message. And I hung up the phone and I just remember feeling bad for this guy. Like he's hurting his health. And the phone rang and I picked it up and MSNBC was blaring in the background. And there's somebody on there freaking out in the same way about the same issue on the other side of the issue. And it was one of those experiences where this light bulb came on and I was like, oh, wow, that's weird. Like it started.
Well, think of how I hear your story. I hear your story because I feel like I'm paying attention and I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing from you is stop watching the news. Don't freak out. But I also, and I hear that, but I also think, I don't know. I feel like right now I need to pay attention.
Here's the difference, right? If you watch the news and you sit and freak out, does it help anything or does it?
It changes what I do in my committee. It does.
Oh, I suppose.
We did a hearing
right?
on the federal cuts and what that means for Alaska. We did a hearing on the new immigration process and what that means for immigrants in Alaska.
Sure.
We did one.
Yeah, I get it. For you, I'm
federal firings, like who's being fired and why.
For sure. And
so I'm trying, but the thing is, am I making a difference? Maybe not. I'm trying to highlight it.
Let me say what I meant though. I'm speaking for like civilian jobs. When I was here, I would have been doing the same thing. Right. And so I'm thinking like civilian and really speaking to the listeners, right? Like it doesn't, for you, yes, you should absolutely do that. I don't blame you for that, right? But you need to be doing, that's your role, right? That's our role when we're in service. To be clear, I'm civilian Josh now. I'm to the listeners. It's if you have something that you're specifically going to change, we should all be informed. But if you just watch the news and you do nothing but get outraged all the time over things you have no control over, then you're not doing anything.
And what I would say is if you're just watching the news all the time and getting outraged, the news is a form of entertainment for you.
It's a money business too.
It's not informing you in such a way that you are a more active citizen. You're actually, if you're spending 3 or 4 hours a night watching the news, you're less of an active citizen. You're not participating in the community around you.
So here's something else that happened later. So when I was serving, I obviously was just like you. I spent 4 years essentially away from my family doing nothing but focused on how do I do this right. And the weight was really heavy because I took it very seriously. And in hindsight, it's like we take ourselves way too seriously sometimes. It was almost like and
I think in this building, you think everyone's watching every word you say, and no one cares.
No one. And you also have to, it's okay to be human. I think that in politics especially, it's this paradigm shift with social media that has been a really rough, bumpy road to understand that everybody's human and we're just trying to get through this human experience and all learn things and improve. And politicians are no different. It's funny, people who had my cell phone for a long time, like all of a sudden didn't call me and would start writing about me on Facebook just because
you're working for Peltola?
Just because I was serving. And
I did it when you were in the house.
Like all of a sudden to them, I was a different person.
You were a corrupt politician. You became a corrupt politician like that.
Yeah, like I was in the Skull Function Caucus or whatever you know what I'm saying? To them, I was this weird, it was different. And to me, I was no different. Like there was nothing different. So The second thing that happened, and I think is probably a good note to end on, was I served from 2018 to 2022. And it was really a lot of ridiculously unconventional things that were occurring. Everything from COVID to coming out of COVID was just political unrest everywhere. And I remember we went to a NCSL. For those listening, it's the National Conference of State Legislatures. So we have legislators from every different political influence from every different state across the country. And so we do the breakout sessions, and there was one on, it was called Combating Misinformation and Disinformation. And usually these breakout groups were like, the idea is that you go and you learn things to add value to what you're doing and work for your state. And there was a lot of value for you get out what you put in, right? And so I love to go to these learn things. I like to learn things. And that was particularly caught my eye because it was so timely. And I think it was like the NSA or someone.
How do we do it?
So what do you mean? How do we? Oh, so yeah. So we went into this, it was like the NSA or somebody. It was this intelligence agency. And so it was packed, like elbow to elbow in there. There was standing room only. And it was every different political influence, like across the spectrum, in there, like ready to fight about their position. And these folks came in and they said, all right, we did a deep dive analysis on the political differences on social media. And we lumped them into two categories that we hear a lot of on social media. I don't know if they did the Google bubble thing or whatever, but it was basically the two categories were Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter, right? Mm-hmm. Opposing, like everything lumped into those two. And they said, so before we even start, I think it's important to say that what we found, our analysis showed that over 60% of the initial online traffic that was snowballed into this chaos that happened across the country were enacted by foreign countries. And then I felt real dumb in that moment. I was like, wow, like how do you, and it was almost like they were rubbing it in. They said, so which one do you think they think is right? Because they're funding both of them.
Right. Because they just want to fund chaos and division.
Yes. And it was like, oh my God, we fell for every bit of it. Yeah. Nobody ever considered maybe both of them are wrong. Maybe both of them are somewhat right. Maybe we need to talk seriously about the issues. Nobody thought about that. Everybody grabbed arms and started fighting one another and fell right into a trap as somebody else is probably sitting back laughing at how easy it was. Not just Russia, but at how easy it was to get us to be full of such vitriol towards one another. And so that's what I would do. That's a good place for everybody to think about, like before. And that's why it's so important to not get yourself so spun up, because if you become,
when you get spun up, you're falling for the trap.
Right. If you become really emotional about something you don't know a lot about, you got to stop and ask yourself why.
Yeah. Hey, do you have a book to recommend to anybody?
Not so much a book, but I've been reading a whole lot lately and I'm going to mention it again, like the drones and what we're doing up there. And related to that is quantum computing. If you don't know about quantum computing, I have been reading about quantum physics and it's interesting. Like it's pretty wild stuff. I had no idea what we were doing. There's two phenomenon with these. Are you familiar with quantum physics at all? Yeah, so superposition and quantum entanglement. Have you heard of these things? So this is what they're using to quantum compute, and very quickly, like superposition is where a subatomic particle is, when it's in superposition, it doesn't have a definite state. So like where our computers use binary systems like gates through transistors that open and shut an electronic gate. It's either a 1 or a 0, and it makes big series of those numbers for code. With quantum computing, it's actually using subatomic particles to compute. They're not binary, which is bizarre. In a subatomic superposition state, they're both a 1 and a 0 simultaneously. These subatomic particles are literally in two places at one time. And then with quantum entanglement, this is something Einstein realized, but he thought he must have been wrong. He called it spooky at a distance. Like he didn't want to talk about it because the theory of relativity is things can't be faster than the speed of light, but this is way fast. There's no delay. So with quantum entanglement, you have two subatomic particles that are entangled, and it means they're joined together in some sort of system that we're unaware of. but it's not defined by distance at all or time. So it's essentially the subatomic particle works in a different dimension, which
With
is
different
hard.
laws.
Yeah, it's hard to even say without laughing. Like, it's science fiction kind of stuff. So I could have one on Mars. If you broke these two entangled particles apart, they're now like bonded in a way that becomes a system. And I could put one of them on Mars and have the other one right here, or put one of them on the other side of the universe. And then however I manipulated this particle, the other one would be simultaneously reacting in the same exact way. So without delay. So essentially it could be on the other side of the universe and be instantaneous. It would move. So with those two things, in order to use these subatomic particles to compute, they've had to get them in a state that's not as volatile as they are naturally. And so they freeze them to almost absolute zero to like the temperature of space.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in order to avoid that and the energy requirements, Microsoft actually invented a new state of matter, which didn't previously exist, which is, gosh, I forget what they call it. Basically, it's photons that are a gel. So they turn light into a gel, like light particles into a gel, which is something that's... So with quantum computing, there's going to be a lot of emerging tech very quickly that's going to be really wild. It's
mind-blowing.
It will be, and it'll happen fast, and it's going to be... I think it'll be the next arms race. Like, I really do. This will be the most disruptive thing we've ever seen, and I think probably in
Human history.
Our history. Yeah, I think so. I bet. The things that'll come as a result of it, yeah.
Josh Revak, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you. Good to see you, man.
It's so late for committee.
Thank you, listeners. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. To contact me, email rep.andrew.gray@aklike.gov or call 907-465-4940.